So, thanks for joining this gathering. Our intention is to explore together the process of what happens in such a group, not just to describe what happens inside of ourselves, but what happens in the collective process as a whole. We're going to be using our skills in paying attention to tracking, to being aware of felt sense, in order to describe the process as we experience it, not as an academic exercise, but as a way of pointing out what may be not so visible and help others see it. Others who have an interest in understanding this process better, but by us sharing how we experience it, we hopefully will be able to help other people see what we see in it, and maybe as a way of doing that, ourselves get a new understanding of what is actually happening to us as we process together. So it may be a little bit strange in the sense that we don't have, a specific topic to discuss, as in, discuss this or that. And anytime you have people gathered, there's usually a focus. Here, we're actually describing and observing the process of us being together and talking about this process. So we're going to start a little bit artificially by saying, what is it that attracts us to this, and taking turns to describe what it is that we appreciate or are curious about or are interested in. And as we grow into this discussion, we will have a chance to notice what happens inside as we notice the process going on and what happens to the group, and we'll take it from there. So whoever wants to start saying something about this, please feel free.
Yes, well, I'm very dedicated to bringing focusing to earthquake preparedness on the Cascadia coast from California, Oregon, Washington, Canada. And in our resonant sensing for peace, especially during the first 2 years, we did lots of resonating with the earth, the ocean, the rocks, the populations, the places where there was fire and distress, the places where there were new horizons. So we resonating, sensing, and sometimes becoming very cold, sometimes becoming still and awake, sometimes becoming, surprised. So thank you. That's what brings me here. This resonance with the earth and how we do that together.
I want to suggest that each person who shares has the option of asking whether they want to be mirrored or not. So if you want to be mirrored, please say so. And if you don't, we just go with somebody else.
Hello, Banu. How nice.
Hello.
Wow.
Hi, sorry, I'm in the car.
That's okay. We just started. Is
Is it okay if I turn off my video?
I prefer if you do, but if it's absolutely important to you to turn it off, please do. If you keep it.
I'll keep it on. Thank you.
Okay.
So I would love some reflection. Thank you from whoever. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody wants to mirror? Resonate.
I sense that you get together in a group to resonate not only in the earth, but also the people who are living on the earth as well in these areas. I sense that you are very surprised with what comes back as you resonate to you from that. A wide variety of feelings from, and I also, in resonating peace, I sense you resonate peace toward places where there is hurt, where there is pain, whether it's a kind of an earthly hurt or pain or human pain. Does that capture some of what you were saying?
Thank you. Yes. Sometimes it's a very quiet resonance.
Ah, very
Sometimes,
quiet.
Sometimes it's surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So it often there's a primordial sense to it. It stretches out over time.
Yeah, a sense not only here and now, but other times and maybe other places, kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. Is there anything else you would like resonated that I missed? Okay.
So, in a normal focusing exchange, what we would be focusing on is this person being resonated with? Does this person recognize herself in the resonance? In this process, we're also paying attention to what has been happening to the group as a whole. And we're paying attention to it not, as an outside observer, making a comment about, oh, I'm here and I'm noticing this and that. But in a way, how what has been happening to the group as a whole is perceived by us in an inner way. And it could be a pretty subtle difference. Just curious to see who might have something to share about what's been happening so far from that perspective.
I'm delighted, something in me is delighted with the bird sounds that I assume others are hearing. So something in me is touched.
I'm noticing as people speak, it's not only what they're saying, but their voices too. There's a connecting, there's a aliveness, a richer and fuller feeling as each person speaks.
When I listen to your sensing into nature, I feel a strong connection to different situations where I feel in a quiet place out in nature where nobody is around, and I can feel the breeze, and I can feel sort of a connecting in a very peaceful way. When I do that early in the morning and go out to a place like that, it somehow enhances my life and every connection that I make during the day. So I want to thank you, Katharina, for really bringing out this, how much we can be connected into that environment wherever we are, in a positive or in living way, which is very, very much in contrast to me when I go into the big city and be in that noise and distraction. So I need for myself a balance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I like reflection.
So the bird that Richard mentioned is coming from my microphone. There's a bird outside, and there's something that feels very wonderful about this happening as we're talking about nature, resonating with nature, and of course a bird, but also the fact that there is not just, there's something very powerful for me about seeing the visual of these 9 screens put together. And the distance, we have very thousands of miles of distance between us. But, we have that sense of connection through the 9 screens. But that also there can be something from the outside that we bring in. And then as we're talking about the collective field, it's not just the 9 of us who are together, but is also what is outside, either what we hear, like the bird, but also all that we bring in of our various experiences, and that are also here together as we are doing this gathering.
I'm here because I'm really curious how collective can happen when people like us come together on the screen together, and we don't actually have a topic to discuss together. So my attraction to come to listen to this is about sensing how the collective can happen.
Thing, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize for being late, and I think I'm gathering everybody's sharing what they're bringing with them or what's coming up for them. Is that correct?
Yeah.
When Nadalu said something about collective, and I've just actually gone through most of the emails about this issue, I wonder if collective is a misleading term. Somehow the word shared came up as a word that opens up more. And I'm also noticing I'm feeling shy because I was late, and also because I don't know a lot of the people here. And I imagine each group creates that field probably differently. And if we're sitting with the intention of creating something, that in itself brings its challenges. But I'm appreciating the capacity to just be and listen, and listen a little deeper. And I do have thoughts about its possibilities, that maybe we can understand this differently, not through a unique formulation or an agreement that this is exactly what happens, but there's definitely something that's worth digging into, so to speak. And that's all I have to say for now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And thank you.
Thank you. I like to jump in here because it just feels so fitting. I really enjoyed your share, Banu. Made me feel very comfortable and more relaxed than before. I'm a little shy because I'm sharing in a foreign language, and I always find it a little challenging to put out my thoughts. But what brings me to this discussion is my interest in healing fields. Like, I come from a therapeutic interest, and an interest in trauma healing, and an interest in collecting or in creating a bigger container for hurt and for pain and for healing. And I've been exploring that in the Resonant Sensing for Peace calls, and also in a practice called circling, which is about authentic relating in groups, and a lot about how the safety and the good conditions for creating a healing container can be approached in some way. And I'm really excited about this, because I think that the next step of healing needs to be co-regulation, like co-regulation in a neurobiological sense, and that this is something that we were born with, and it's something that will help us make the next step. So, and I sense that, like, when the sharing started, there weren't only the words, and of course I bring my history with listening to Katerina before this call, and just feeling that tenderness and that care that you bring to what you do. And then that was reflected in how David responded to it. It was less the words, but more the tenderness and the care that I just felt was reflected. So it's just, it's a good place to be in. And that's all. I'll go with that. Thank you.
So I want to just share a little bit of what comes up for me as I think of the past few exchanges. There's a question about, the curiosity about how is it that this collective process, this shared process, happens and take place and forms. And we notice that as we bring ourselves in, including, the various circumstances, or I'm late, or I'm this, or here's my background, and we put more of ourselves. We feel more part of the group, and presumably the group feels more connected and stronger. And in that process, we are actually here and now in the midst of collective regulation, because as we bring ourselves in, either facts or feelings, what is happening is there is a sense of attunement between us. Certainly that's my experience of it. And as a result of feeling more comfortable and feeling part of the group. And I'm just curious about whether that is your experience as well.
I don't know whether others are, what I sense that you're talking about with attunement, and Serge, and what you were talking, Andrea and Katarina, about, I sense it as some kind of presencing. And for me now, presencing always has at least a little loving in it if it's going to be the right thing. It must bring that, otherwise I feel very uncomfortable in it. And I feel comfortable here. Well, let's put it this way. I feel about as comfortable as I get initially in a group sharing. That's my background. It's nothing particular to this group. Yeah, given how I grew up, I feel the easiest with individuals coming in, and with, I mean, I look out and I see the mountains. I mean, obviously you can't see them here, but that's where I feel that presencing. And the presencing isn't something, it's something in a way that we make, but it's also something that's always already there. For me, it's like the presencing I get from the earth, and then that's what comes through, including the loving. Which for me is a great relief, because it isn't something I have to make or keep going. It's not something I'm responsible for. It's something that as I'm able, I let myself be open to it, coming around and in me and through me. But I have that always already there sense of that kind of presencing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is very different from a felt sensing, because I feel a felt sensing, I go inside and I go to a place with this presencing and wait for the felt sensing to form. Here, I open myself to what's already there. If someone would be willing to reflect my somewhat rambling talks, I would appreciate that.
So I'd be happy to. Very summarizing for me, the thing that really resonated with me as you spoke was the sense of not having to effort, mm-hmm. but allowing what is already there.
Yeah. In fact, I find that if I'm not allowing what's already there in me, I probably can't open to the presencing very well. It doesn't have to be good what's in me, I just have to be open with it.
Mm-hmm. You are using the word presencing, Dave. Would you say more about that? What do you mean by presencing?
Well, Nada, you will understand. I originally started becoming aware of it through Ed and Pete with the caring feeling presence. Now, the way they approached it, it was sort of like something I, Dave, should be doing with. And I found more and more that it's already there. That even if I can't be loving, which is often the case. This is one of the things I struggle with the politics we have going in our country. But I don't have to, because loving is already always there. I just have to open myself to that.
Would you like me to reflect that?
I would appreciate it.
It's something that you learn from Ed and Pete, that we don't have to make an effort to create something around us, because it's already there. You just need to open yourself towards it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And if the felt sense forms, it will form as a result or along the way or something of that kind. So felt sense is to follow the formation of it.
Well, I felt sense have to have this, but in a way it doesn't form well, at least in my experience, unless I have this. A felt sense is always about this particular situation. This presencing is about the whole, larger than that, different than that.
So felt sensing is about the situation, and this presencing is already there. You don't need to do anything. You just need to open yourself to it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm curious if that's what other people are experiencing, anything like that, in their resonating. Not that they have to, but I'm wondering.
I'd like to say something.
Hello, Banu.
Hi. Hi, Dave. Nice to see you, first of all.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, what you're saying resonates with me a lot because, a little bit when I was doing my dissertation research, I had come to how that kind of nuttiness that happens when you're really into something, that thinking about the process model and the level 6, 7, 8, and then I came to something that makes sort of 8 possible and feeds it, and I called it like care. And I'd shared it with Gene, and he was kind of not that into it. He didn't like what was going around. But yeah, I think there is something there that even makes focusing possible. And if you want to be sort of pedestrian about it, like, why would you even focus? Why do we even do anything that what we're doing right now?
Oh, to me, that's very clear. Yeah. This is something that I let bring to situations, and the focusing is my embodiment of the situation. Gene talks about how focusing arrives out of a general bodily sensing into a this.
Yeah, I think I skipped. Sorry, I took us somewhere we didn't need to go. I'm going to stay with what you're saying. But yes, there is this more. What I'm hearing from you is there is this wider presencing or caring, something like love, not in some of the ways we talk about it, that is there, that we can tap into.
Yeah. It's a sense of loving, hoping, a sense of infinite beauty. I live in a dark place. I can go out at night and see the Milky Way. Which draws. There's a kind of a two-way drawing that when I open up, I find myself reaching out to that, and that reaching back to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of that works for you.
I want to interrupt for a second, just with the idea that this hopefully will be listened to by people who don't necessarily have too much knowledge of focusing. And so I want to interject the idea that as we talk, and there's no reason at all to not mention what we've done, which was wonderful, but say if people who are listening to this feel intimidated by the sense of, oh, is there a difference between focusing and presencing, and what is it, and what's a felt sense? And probably the experience of going there is one that you go to your head, you feel drawn outside. And so if that's the case, maybe to come back to actually what is behind the discussion of words. And what's happening is, to notice things like mentioning the experience of loving, the experience of the simplicity of being there. In other words, to not hear it with a sense of, oh, is this something I don't know, therefore I cannot really follow this discussion. But what is happening in there that I can follow and relate to. And so this is in a way part of my wanting to make this more inclusive of people who are in the future listening to this and may not be as conversant with some of these terms.
Yeah.
Serge, I hear you saying that you would like to make this all-inclusive, so when somebody listens to this later on who is not familiar with focusing language, wouldn't be lost, but could follow what is going on here. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and I would like to suggest that I would prefer if we think about 9 of us, try to share or gel, or rather than thinking who else is going to be included, I'd like to have an experience of kind of connecting to 8 other people. Rather than thinking of the future use of this, what we are doing.
Yes.
Would somebody reflect that?
I'd be very happy to reflect. You have a preference for focusing right now on the 9 of us and our experience together, the 9 of us. as
experience,
opposed to thinking about a possible future.
Future use of it.
Yeah.
Not future, but future use of this.
Yeah, the future use of it. So being in this experience and the 9 of us here, as opposed to a future use of it and other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And by the way, having heard this, I also want to share that there's something that feels very heartwarming about this and helps me feel even more connected to the group as something that says what is happening here and now is of what is of value among us.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to say something, and also in saying that, reflect back something that you've said, Sergey, is that how you pronounce your name?
Serge?
Serge, sorry. That I appreciate Nada's call. That to me seems, I hadn't thought of it, but it feels important. And also, I heard you say something earlier that we only caught one strand of, that you mentioned, if I heard you correctly, that the more we bring of ourselves into the group, the more we can share maybe of what's going on for us, the more group becomes something that we can all participate in, that it changes the experience. I think I heard something along those lines, and I would like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So there is a big difference the way I feel it. If this is going to be just something right here in this moment for us happening, and if we somehow talk about future making use of what is happening here, then it feels more like a performance. And that takes away from the intimacy of just being here and now with each one. And I think that's sort of something that's Nada mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a big difference of thinking, here in this moment, we can really connect and be present. It comes back to Dave's presencing.
Mm-hmm.
Giving our presencing in this moment feels very safe and intimate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to share my personal experience of the last couple of shares, starting with I actually really appreciated that calling back that you, like, I heard it as a let's take everybody with us, Serge, like when you said, yeah, let's make this understandable too, because it kind of resonated with the sense of confusion that had come up in me. So I was grateful for in whichever way you picked that up or formulated it for you. I did find, or for me, it did express the present moment, at least in my perception. And I think that is something really fascinating in groups too, that we do pick up each other's like even a discomfort or a small question or a little confusion, and then bring it back in a different way. And that is what I felt happened with you, you know, because I felt, yeah, this is good. This is going to slow things down for me. And it's going to allow me to come in with my experience. And when you shared that I really appreciated the love that is already there. And then I always think of Rumi, who says, your task is not to find love, but to find the obstacles that keep you from it, you know, that don't allow you to tap into it. And I have to say that I have experienced this very, very, very often in groups, that I seem to run into the obstacles and felt like it wasn't safe to share. It wasn't safe because everybody else was, in my mind, tapping into something else, like the thing I should be tapping into. So I just feel like I'm very, very strong. And it has changed my life to be in groups where I could share that and where I did, in the end, feel safe. Not always to the same extent, but venturing out there with this sense of, oh, I'm the odd one out. I'm running against this obstacle, and I'm just really passionate, nearly, about advocating to listen to the most silent voice in a group, because that's usually the one that points to the obstacle, not only for that person but for the whole field. And that is what came up with this, like with this pointing that you brought in, Serge, and how it just felt totally resonant with my experience. Yeah, thank you.
So as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing something about what happened. I think, you know, the thing that was very powerful, you said, I needed a moment to slow down. And when I heard that, I realized I needed a moment to slow down. But instead of staying with the experience of I need a moment to slow down, I actually didn't slow down and put it, you know, kind of went a couple of steps ahead and started thinking about other people who might in the future. But so what really came very strongly is I needed to slow down, and I didn't stay fully in the present moment of I need to slow down and express it, but in a way went outside. And in a way, what felt very grounding when Nada pointed what she did was actually, it kind of helped me bring back to, I didn't quite figure it out until you articulated, Andrea, but I think it felt good after Nada pointed out what she did, because in some way it kind of helped me bring me back there. And so I found it a very, very, I'm very grateful that both of you shared this.
I'm just sensing, I'm just amazed on what wants to emerge in our group, starting with caring and loving and presencing, which really felt like it just wanted to be voiced. And then this beautiful exchange just right now of how one person sometimes can't recognize something, and we need each other to tenderly and care, you know, with care and slowing down to just kind of voice something that they're feeling, and it resonates with the other, and it helps them and moves them forward. And as each one's moved forward, it just feels like we're all moved forward in a deeper way. So I'm just being very in awe of seeing what's emerging in our group, and even the gentle little dances that are happening to let us dance a little freer here. So very nice.
I want to resonate with sound and movement. The and that expanding gesture and a sense and a sound of contentment.
revolutionary pause.
I'm always amazed about the difference that I sense when we can actually look at each other and see the different faces and the expressions. It's so true that it's not just the words, but our whole being that we become aware of in such a deep, expressed being way. Even when we are silent, I can sort of sense everybody in a way which is beyond the words. I'm really grateful for this opportunity that technology is somehow giving us now to be present to each other.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So Crystal, you're amazed about the possibility of seeing each other and each other's expressions and mimicking and backgrounds. And there is so much more than just writing or talking or on the phone that and you're really grateful for the technology that developed to this extent that we actually feel almost like you didn't say that, I'm adding it, feel almost being in the same room.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Plus seeing yourself. Which I find quite amazing because it's not a usual group experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So maybe I want to encourage us to go a little bit more there, because it was alluded to in many ways at the beginning as people introduced themselves, a little bit of, shyness going into a group or limitations of being ourselves when being a group. And so this dance that we have of feeling the connection with the group while at the same time being ourselves.
I might say it a little stronger. I sense that as I can be as I am with the presencing of the group, I become more myself. If I didn't feel that, I would be withdrawing. I mean, instinctively, my body would come in. No? It comes out now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also feel that it is much stronger now, or it's even there, which wasn't there in the beginning. Just by the awareness of seeing you and hearing each one of you feels, oh, now I'm safe and now we are here. Oh, it's an ongoingness of developing or evolving in just sort of what half an hour, 3/4 of an hour feels Like a gift.
Mm.
I caught up with something. I think, Banu, you said that you didn't like the word collective. You like better shared. And I agree with that. I don't like collective. It feels artificially put together. Shared is different. Shared kind of has a sense. The word shared for me is I'm still independent, but I'm sharing parts of me that I want to share, and the rest is mine. And collective, I kind of lose identity. I'm forced to lose some of my identity. So I appreciate you picking up on that difference of the word.
Gee, I mean, that just appears to me right now when you say this, how I hate collectives, but I love the individual kind of, each one of you I feel differently, not as we are all something the same. We are each one totally different, but accepting of the difference of individuality is a different, I don't have a word for it. It's sort of, and yet we are together in some way. We are not lonely in it. We are held in something by each one.
I kept coming up in my mind, holding and letting keeps coming up since David spoke about like how it feels like we can be more of ourselves with others. That there is a holding and there's a letting, and it seems to me to be with the sense that it's okay, like there's a relaxing that can happen, that there's a letting and allowing. And there's also a holding, and there's a sense of being met, maybe for all different sides of me, that creates a fuller sense of participation, curiosity, and a moving towards something more rather than being enclosed within the group. So this is starting to feel that way to me right now. And it seems like there was something going on that what Crystal said. Crystal said about, like, I was thinking holding and letting, and Nada said what she did, and then sort of there's some kind of thinking happening that's beyond our little skin envelopes.
Very important too.
Yeah.
It's sort of, it's not a being swallowed up in some kind of collective grouping. It's somehow reaffirming each other in the specialness of being you, and being you, and being you, and being you. And wow, I can be me here.
Yeah.
It's neat.
Serge, you are smiling oops.
Who is that naked people coming in here?
I don't know what that is.
That is funny.
Yeah. But yeah. No, I am smiling. It feels very satisfying, and that sense of what I'm hearing is that wonderful description of as we're each describing what's happening. It feels like it's deepening it, and there is that sense of articulating the me, how the group enhances being me, the sense of being held, that sense of the experience inside together with the experience as a group. And I have a sense of the words failing me to, so, the smiling is about the sense that what the attempts we're making at describing what's happening can resonate with each other and resonate deeply within me. And I think a sense of maybe part of what connects us is we're resonating to something that is beyond what the words can express. That's a shared experience.
And I have a sense, I have a feel of the shared experience being also there too, a we. A togethering.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Jean always liked to talk about both and. The we, the me and the we, and then the more than that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm noticing something. Sorry, Nada. Go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment. The we is important to you, David.
Mm-hmm. It is.
The we, yeah. I hear you.
Yeah.
Go on.
Thank you, Nada.
Andrea, please continue.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm noticing something just like building up very slowly, and it started. I think I shared this feeling about the collective, and I think it's heightened in some way by being German. That very, very strong wariness against collective, whatever, collective subconscious, because it seems to, like, the more collective, the more subconscious it gets, or something like that. And then I just noticed that when for me, what happens is when I stay in a space of, oh, this is good, and like, this sharing, this reassuring, and this reinforcing the how good this feels, I tend to fall out of it. I just watch myself falling out of it and getting really attentive and I'm really struck by what keeps us from unconsciously going into a collective instead of a sharing. What is that? Because I think there are some mechanisms, like some default, and I just notice myself being really wary of it. I'm at the same time fascinated and in love with groups, and really wary of them, like really. I've noticed that before, and this is just what came up over the last a couple of shares that were quite harmonious and then I noticed that I go, oh, what is this? And it seems to be this dance between individual experience and shared experience, and it seems to, for me, it seems like there needs to be a dance. There always needs to be an input or some, kind of feedback about this feels to me like, and this is why I'm sharing it. This is what it feels to me like. Yeah, this is what it feels like for me. Yeah.
May I say back what I heard you say?
I love that.
I'm not sure I got it all, but I heard that given your background being German, there is a sense of hesitation, or there's a certain load to the word collective. And you're noticing that as much as you appreciate the power of groups, the potential of groups, you also are wary. And I'm also aware I'm not using quite your words, but there is something that stops us from being merged into the collective, that good feeling, well, at least for some of us. And maybe you're wondering about that, and maybe you'd like us to think about it. What might be in that border, so to speak. And also you wanted us to maybe acknowledge that it's always a dance, that we sort of have to hold both sides in a particular way, and that there's a tension there. So I'm curious if I got what was meaningful for you.
Yeah. I think it's close, and it's part, like, it's not, I don't want it to be heard as a, I think it's a, I think Rosa contributed that to the discussion in a way that in a group there's always this dance between like the silent voices in the group and even some disconcerting voices, or and then there is the felt or the group sense shifts and starts anew and marinates in that, and then there is a new experience, individual experience that can just, and this is how I understood what she was saying, that the group felt sense, if there is anything like that, can shift. Yeah, it's too much elaboration, and you were very close. Thank you, Vanu.
I want to build on this, and it may or may not resonate with you, but what comes up for me with this is the sense that the voice that says, wait a minute, that feels reluctant to be dragged into the collective, or he is careful and cautious about, has a sense of, wait a minute. What happened to me when I feel it and I said that, wait a minute, in a way, as a gesture itself evoked the pause. And then what I'm hearing you say, and what I certainly very much resonate with, is that it's a little bit like the process of the pause interrupting autopilot. And the collective, in some way, we're drawn, and there's a seduction of feeling I'm really held, I'm part of this group, and it feels wonderful. Or it can actually feel threatening if the group is going in a place that I'm not going. But the dissonance, the voice that says, wait a minute, I don't just get there, is actually what allows the process to move forward. Because it's not just the flow going one-sided, but it's a pause. And then something else comes up.
Yeah, totally. That resonates a lot. Thanks.
Well, it's this kind of being creates some kind of resistance in me, because I don't like the being, I like the meing, not the being. But in the being is sort of much stronger than being taken over by whatever kind of collective life-giving or destroying or whatever, there is such a strong resistance in me, and I feel some of what you're saying is echoing it in some way. It's a being. Okay. But there is also connecting, but that's different than a weeing.
There's something about weeing that's important for you to avoid. Is that it?
Mm-hmm. Very strongly.
Very strongly, very strongly. Can you say a little more from that place?
It's being taken over by something or someone very influential. It feels like, wait a minute, I still need to be here, me.
Yeah. As you start losing the me, you back off from the we. The we becomes something that takes away you or something like that. Is that it?
It feels like it, yes. I mean, any kind of being feels, yeah, be you. I want to meet you as you, and I want to be met as me. And in our differences, there is something that feels we can afford to hold each other's individual being.
Yeah. As an individual.
As the individual.
Yeah.
So I want to comment on the visual part of Crystal. I was struck by how you go here. Okay. And so I see this as literally, the distancing. It feels great to be here in the group. Hey, I'm me. I can see the group from me versus the group coming back. And the back and forth is that dance we're talking about. And it's not an either or. It's really that's a process in which we can be ourselves and be in the group and be sustained as opposed to being swallowed. I think that's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that it is the end. So, we had, and some people are texting that might be leaving. I want to just maybe have a moment that we come together, see if there is just a couple of words, a gesture, something that is a bookmark for us to conclude this, which I think there is a strong sense that we want to continue this kind of exploration. But what's happening here and now today, if anybody wants to give a little bit of a bookmark.
I would love to come back with the 9 of us. Yes, it's very, very special. After a long time not to see Nada, it's very, very special. And finally to meet Banu after all the word that we've had together, and David as well. It just, there's a kind of weaving, and thank you so much. Yeah. I am going to host a class for Gisela Uhl, who is teaching philosophy. She has wanted since 2011. We had that focusing conference at Asilomar, and she gave a class on top of the hill there, and it was so marvelous that some of us just swept her off her feet And we carried her all around in the sunshine to say thank you. And ever since then, she wanted to have a class. So this is her 19th class coming up now. And thank you. I hope to see you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Katrina.
I'll wait till everyone says goodbye, of course. Just a few more minutes, yeah.